The original Godzilla is a great movie that stands the test of time, but what about its sequel? Let's take a look at Godzilla Raids Again. In the opening moments, we see two small scouting planes flying over the ocean. One, piloted by Kobayashi, suddenly has engine problems and crash lands on a mysterious island. The other pilot, Shoichi, attempts a rescue and the pilots reunite, only to find themselves in the middle of a territorial dispute between Godzilla and a giant quadruped monster. Both men escape and return to Osaka and report what they've seen. What I think is the Osaka-based branch of the Japanese Self-Defense Force believe the other monster to be an ancient Ankylosaurus, according to this particular set of subtitles at least, that was disrupted by the hydrogen bomb just as both Godzillas were. They asked Dr. Yamane to fly in from Tokyo and tell them how to handle the situation, but he just kinda shrugs his shoulders and sits them down to watch the first movie. This goes on for a few minutes because they needed a cheap way to add some runtime, and you know what, those shots were so dang good that they may as well show them off a second time, right? Afterward, Yamane basically tells them they're shit out of luck and then collects his check for the cameo on his way out. The JSDF then starts sending out planes and ships to search for the two monsters, after they were last spotted diving into the ocean. They successfully locate Godzilla and track his whereabouts. Cut to a brief musical interlude that was totally necessary. After a couple of minutes, it is finally interrupted by an announcement ordering everyone to seek shelter because Godzilla is nearing Osaka. The G-Dawg surfaces, but the JSDF successfully deploy a glittery light show that draws him away. But we quite randomly cut to a prison transport vehicle full of convicts who manage to stage an escape. Shoichi and Kobayashi, the pilots from the intro, are just driving by minding their own business when the police flag them down and force them to take part in a high-speed chase. They're chasing a couple of criminals who stole a fuel truck that then promptly crash into an oil refinery and explode harder than my toilet on Taco Bell Tuesday. Subscribe for more like this. And because this Godzilla gets quite turned on by fireworks, he spins right round, baby, and raids Osaka. The military try everything they can, but it's no use. And just to make sure everyone's pants turn brown, Anguirus wanders in on the party too. And yeah, I've been calling him Anguirus my whole life. I ain't stopping now, even though the subs refer to him as Anguillus here. So anyway, the two Beastie Boys here immediately start butting heads while being peppered by humanity's bottle rockets. And it's a pretty hellish scene where the refinery fire spreads throughout the city while the two kaiju battle their way across it. Admittedly, I've never watched this one before because I'd only ever heard negative things, but the fights between Godzilla and Anguirus are genuinely fun to watch. They're not just giving each other little love taps to avoid damaging the costumes, they actually look a lot like a couple of stray cats going at it, clawing, tearing, biting, and body slamming each other all around. Frankly, these bits are more entertaining than a lot of other fights in later movies. Well, going off memory anyway. I don't like the way some of the footage was sped up, but it turns out that was kind of a mistake, which I'll talk about later. And hell, since I'm talking about other things now anyway, I'll go ahead and mention that Shoichi, his girlfriend Hidemi, and Kobayashi are main characters here. They've been in the movie all throughout, but honestly, the vast majority of their scenes haven't been worth mentioning. Sadly, they don't hold a candle to Ogata, Emiko, and Serizawa from the first movie, but I'll go more in-depth later. I had way more fun watching the rest of those escaped prisoners get their comeuppance anyway. Anywho, Godzilla and Anguirus duke it out for quite a long time until finally, about halfway through the movie, G-Dawg earns his championship belt when he takes a big old chomp out of his rival's neck, throws him in the water, and then melts his ass with atomic breath for good measure. The good news is Japan has one less kaiju to worry about. The bad news is the other one is a certified badass motherfucker who's in a pretty foul mood. Even the news report is like, okay, send in the H-bomb because we got nothing left. Luckily, Godzilla's had a very trying day and decides to go nurse his wounds. Osaka is pretty much nothing but rubble at this point. And, we then spend entirely too much time watching our main characters discussing their jobs, being relocated to Hokkaido, and I just don't care. They do get their operations going again, and to make a needlessly long story short, Godzilla is eventually found hanging out on an icy little island. Shoichi is the one who finds him, but Kobayashi is later killed by G-Dawg's atomic breath. They decide to bomb the island, which buries Godzilla under several tons of ice, but don't worry, he'll be okay. Just ask Steve Rogers. The end. Ugh. Yeah, I'll say it, this one's kind of a stinker. Godzilla Raids Again was rushed into production just a few weeks after the first movie released in theaters. Toho was already happy with the box office results and went full steam ahead on a cash grab sequel, but apparently forgot a key detail. That first one resonated with moviegoers because it was a much deeper story than you'd expect from a movie about a big dumb monster. The script had a point to it, and the main characters contributed greatly to the overall plot. The characters in Godzilla Raids Again are entirely forgettable, and most of their scenes could be cut out without losing anything important. The actors aren't even bad. They all did a good job, actually. I don't think there was a single performance that stuck out even as being mediocre. So if anything, whoever handled the casting nailed it. And so did Eiji Tsuburaya. Bringing Godzilla to life the first time around wasn't easy, and now he and his team of special effects artists had to make a second monster that could wrestle with Godzilla in addition to everything else that went into one of those movies. I think the miniatures actually improved a bit. My immersion was never really broken by the effects. Even though this was apparently a motorized walking Godzilla that utterly failed and instead just had to stand there and be filmed at a distance. But there's a caveat. I really don't like the Godzilla suit made for this movie. It's great that they slimmed it down to make things easier for Nakajima. I just don't like the design as much as the first. And I guess the new puppet's teeth are pretty derpy too, but it really wasn't a deal breaker. The fact that they did all that in such a short span of time is extremely impressive. I know the movie also had a new director, with Motoyoshi Oda coming in to replace Ishiro Honda, but I don't think the movie's shortcomings can be blamed on that director. I wouldn't say Oda's work is bad at all, just different. If anything, Oda shoots everything with a much greater clarity that I may even prefer a little. It comes at the expense of the first movie's grittiness, but again, I don't think one style is worse than the other. The one nitpick I have about the action is concerning the sped up monster scenes. Supposedly, Oda actually originally intended for the action to be slowed down, but his camera operator made a mistake and sped things up. He ended up liking it and used that footage instead of reshooting. It's not a big deal, though, and I may actually be in a minority of people who don't entirely like the faster footage. That just comes down to personal preference. The script is really the biggest problem. It needed to go through a few revisions to tighten everything up and make the characters more important. But they didn't, and the end result is a movie that isn't fun to sit through. This is one of those sad cases where there's plenty of good things in it, like the general idea of bringing in another monster for Godzilla to fight, but it's really just not a good movie. So yeah, that means I don't recommend this one. The fights between Godzilla and Anguirus are great, so definitely try to watch those online somewhere, but the movie as a whole is just too dull. Even the audiences back in 1955 didn't much care for it, and so Godzilla stayed buried under the ice for 7 long years, until Toho was presented with an idea good enough to bust him out. That's a story for another time. So leave a comment below if you'd like me to cover King Kong vs. Godzilla. But that's all I got for you guys today. I'm Baffled, and hope to see you next time. Bye!